This is a video response to Turd, Flinging Monkey, and for really specifically one point that he made in his video response to O'Shea Duke Jackson. I really didn't see O'Shea Duke Jackson's video about what he said about black people and concerning MGTOW. I really don't rock with O'Shea Duke Jackson like that. You know, I don't know. I'm not gonna personally attack him, but I don't know. I just don't get down with him like that. Turd, Flinging Monkey, on the other hand, I'm on the edge of my seat when he posts a new video. You know, I do like his content. You know, he's very thorough in his research. You know, he comes with some deep concepts and some deep thoughts, and he has a sense of humor about him, and he spices up his videos to keep my attention and whatnot. So I am a fan of Turd, Flinging Monkey, and it hasn't been much since I've been subscribed to him. It hasn't been much, that I've it hasn't been much of his content that I've had a discrepancy with. But it's when I heard this video response, when I heard this specific point that he made within this video response, immediately my antennas went up and just red flags all over the place. And that point was, I guess O'Shea Duke Jackson was, using, the classic black guilt of the transatlantic slave trade as a talking point. He was trying to, hit white MGTOWs with that stick and whatnot. And Turd, Flinging Monkey, his response was, if it wasn't for white people freeing you from slavery, you wouldn't be free, and this, that, and the third. The it's been a while since I watched the video. I've come back. I made my comment in the comment section, you know, and didn't get any notifications. Came back from time to time just to check on my comment. Nothing. So tonight I'm scrolling through the comment section, and lo and behold, it was just nobody replied to my comment, but the comment section was just littered with, and I hate to use this term because it's been overused so much on YouTube that I don't know, it kind of lost its muchness, but I can't think of a better term to use for this. But the intellectual dishonesty, the comment section was just riddled with intellectual dishonesty, and I had to throw my hat in the ring. So I'm going through the comment section, I'm replying to various comments, erroneous comments at that, and it just got to a point where I said, you know what, I'm not even gonna go back and forth, because I'm not the type of YouTuber that go back and forth on a patty cake tit for tat type of thing in the comment section. I'm not that guy. I'm not even really an avid YouTube vid maker. It just so happened that I'm on Christmas break. I got some free time on my hands, so hell, might as well make a vid. But and before I go any further, I just want to state that I'm not personally attacking Turd, Flinging Monkey or O'Shea Duke Jackson, even though I'm not, subscribed to O'Shea, or I watch his vids, even though I don't do that. I have no ill wills towards him. You know, but I am an avid Turd, Flinging Monkey subscriber, and I do watch his vids. Every new vid he comes out with, for the most part, I'm on it. But this is not an attack on any of them. I really would just like to get some honest discourse about this particular subject, that being the transatlantic slave trade and American slavery, because I'm seeing a lot of on both sides, white and black. I'm seeing ill-informed black people trying to make a point, and when they make this point, they're trying to hit white people with a particular stick, and that stick is ineffective. And because the stick is based on a foundational fallacy and misnomer. And then I see white people, for the most part, some of them, they know the fallacy, like they're in on the inside joke, they're in on the secret, but they play to the black people's ignorance, and then they grab the stick, and then they turn around and hit black folks with the same stick. And I'm like, nobody's gonna get anywhere until we have an honest discourse about this. And that honest discourse being is the truth behind the transatlantic slave trade and American slavery. Little background information about me. Um, come from a big city in middle America. I grew up on the outskirts of a city, and at the start of my junior high, I moved out to an affluent white suburb of said city. Come from a middle class family, not the richest, then not the poorest, but anyway, K through 5 grew up in the city, moved out to the suburbs in middle school, total culture shock. And with that being said, you will be surprised the things a 12 or 13-year-old white kid will say to you in gym class when you're kicking his ass in football. You'll be surprised. And on the same ticket, you'll be surprised what a 90-year-old white man to say to you when he's on his deathbed. You look over like, what that motherfucker said? you know? So a good portion of my life I've been in close proximity with, well-to-do. But anyway, what the fuck was I saying? To get straight to the point, this is the thing that I don't like about this whole transatlantic slave trade narrative. When black folks try to use that stick to hit white people with, and when white people grab said stick and hit black people with it, because the whole exchange is built on a fallacy, and it's just built on a lie. First of all, the North American, well, the Negro American male, whether that's North America, Central America, or South America, and the Caribbeans, we are not African. We did not come from Africa. We are indigenous to the Americas. When Christopher Columbus landed in Cuba, 1492, he ran it. When he ran his ship ashore in Cuba, he got off and he seen an island full of Yasiel Puigs and whatnot. We did not come from Africa. We are not African. Our phenotype more resembles, the Negro people of the South Pacific. But anyway, and furthermore, in this city that I'm from, I've throughout my years, all throughout my 20s, I have socialized with Africans. I socialize with everybody, but when I come across Africans, I ask them a series of specific questions because I'm kind of knowledgeable about the continent of Africa, and then when I hit them with some shit, they're kind of surprised because they're like, "Oh, you know about that? You know about that?" So we kind of get to talking, and they kind of warm up to me, and I start asking them some real questions, and they start giving me some real answers. And I ask them, well, what country are you from? What tribe are you from? Yada yada yada, this, that, and the third. But if more specifically, if they are from West Africa, I ask them the same question, but I'm really looking for West Africans I'm really looking to ask this question to West Africans, but I ask all Africans this, whether they come from Central Africa, South Africa, or East Africa. I ask them all this. If I'm sitting down and we're chilling and, we're getting to know each other and the conversation goes this way, I ask them this one specific question. I say, back home, amongst your tribesmen, your guys' oral history, do you have any recollection of the transatlantic slave trade? If you do, please recount it to me. 9 times out of 10, they all say, no, our oral history does not corroborate the transatlantic slave trade. And I've heard Nigerians say this. I've spoken to Gambians from Gambia. They've said this. I've talked to Senegalese from Senegal. They've said this. Ghanaians, Liberians. Shout out to the Liberians. I really do rock with y'all. Y'all some good people. Congolese have said this. Uh, Ugandans, Ethiopians, Eritreans, Tanzanians, Kenyans. A friend of mine was married to this African gal for like 10 years, right? And one of her favorite things that she would say, because she would constantly differentiate her people from our people, and she would always say, you guys are not African. You are not African. You are not African. So I'm saying, Africans will tell you, you can even talk to, well, I don't know, they might put on the front for y'all, but I've talked to them. I've spoke with them, especially the ones from West Africa, namely Nigeria, from said area where the African captives were supposed to have been, you know, ascertained and then transported to the Americas, right? They've all said the same shit. That transatlantic slave trade shit didn't go on over here. We have no history of that shit. And truth be told, this is something I've been knowing my whole life, given my family's oral history and whatnot. They've always, my elders in my family have always told me, our true history and whatnot. And that just confirmed it. And also, I got some information and some references from this history book that I got. I took History 121 in college and whatnot, and kept the book. And this is basically from Columbus to the Reconstruction. And this is a book that I bought from the bookstore at a white university. And what's funny is they put the shit right in our faces, and a lot of the times we don't even have it in us to look it out. We don't have the critical thinking skills to look the shit up, or to actually see it for what it is. It's like an inside joke that everybody's in on but us. You know, and my father, he told me, he gave me some tips on going through college, and he said, back when he was in college, his classmates used to ask him how would he get all these good scores on the test, and he was just say, man, I just read the book. Just read the book. So, I followed that same strategy. I got this book and I just read it. Every chapter we went over, I read the chapter. But anyway, this is what it says in the first chapter, talking about Columbus, in the section, the peoples of the pre-continent, the peoples of pre-contact Americas. And I quote, more recent archaeological evidence suggests that not all early migrants to the Americas came across the Bering Strait. Let me say that again. More recent archaeological evidence suggests that not all early migrants to the Americas came across the Bering Strait. What does that mean? People that came across the Bering Strait are Mongoloids. So not all people who were pre-Columbus are Mongoloids. Go down a little bit further. Recent evidence has identified a possible early population group that does not seem to have Asian characteristics. Let me read that again. Recent DNA evidence has identified a possible early population group that does not seem to have Asian characteristics. Does Lucia ring a bell? Lucia, obviously, she has clear Negroid features. Going further, a couple pages further, in a chapter that's titled Christopher Columbus. And this is the reason why he called the indigenous peoples Indians. He called the natives Indians because he believed they were from the East Indies in the Pacific. Now, when I read this section, hold on, before I get into that about the recent DNA evidence, I had seen the video about Lucia's skeleton excavation in Brazil prior to reading this. So when I read this, instantly light bulbs went off. But about this East Indies in the Pacific deal, let me read it again. He called the natives Indians because he believed they were from the East Indies in the Pacific. So when I read that, I said, where is the East Indies? Because they call the Caribbeans the West Indies, right? So I'm like, okay, so where's the East Indies? Google, Bing, right? Got on there, East Indies. The East Indies / Dutch Indies came up. And it was a map of Northern Australia, Papua New Guinea, Vanuatu, and all of those islands within the South Pacific. So I said, let me search indigenous peoples of Papua New Guinea. Guess what popped up? Dark-skinned people, Negroid features, wide nose, big lips, and nappy hair. Vanuatu, same thing. So then as the course and the semester progressed, we started going over talking about, the crown and whatnot in England and whatnot, and some of the problems that England had during the initial colonization periods of North America. And the English had two problems. First problem, the country was overpopulated. Not to mention, they had a civil war, or they just had got out of a civil war. That was the British Wars, which was a war between the Scots, the English, and the Irish. And the English subdued the whole UK. That's why it's called the United Kingdom. They subdued all the peoples and brought them under one rule. So when they got done with that civil war, they had a whole bunch of Scottish POWs and a whole bunch of disenfranchised and displaced Scots, and a litany of Irish POWs and displaced Irishmen. So the country was overpopulated. They went to Ireland, knocked down towns, and then all the people were forced to come to London and forced to come to the major cities in England to survive. And same thing for the Scots. So first of all, their country was overpopulated. Second problem they had was they didn't have enough people to work the colonies in the Americas. Not to mention, they were warring with the Portuguese, warring with the Spanish, and warring with the French. Well, at least the Spanish and the French. I don't know about the Portuguese. I think the Portuguese was just, they went south and did their own thing. But for sure they were warring with the Spanish and the French. So they were stretched pretty thin. So the two problems: overpopulated home country, not enough people to work the colonies in the Americas. Then I asked myself a question. I said, how do you kill two birds with one stone? You take the lower rung of your current society, you coerce them into forced servitude some way, and you make them work the colonies. That's how you do it. And I remember, I never forget this shit, especially, going through middle school and high school in an affluent majority white suburb. Every time February would come around, go to history class. The history teacher would just gloss right over indentured servitude. He or she'll talk about indentured servitude for like 2 days out of the week. But then expound on slavery, but then expound on transatlantic African slavery for like the whole fucking month of February and shit. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. So if you can kill two birds with one stone by taking the lower rung of your population, coercing them into forced labor, i.e., indentured servitude, you're essentially getting free labor to work the colonies, to advance your empire, to advance your global influence, and you're depopulating your home country to get it away from that critical mass that can bring harm to your country and whatnot. So this is how it really went down. When they needed workers to work the colonies and whatnot, they went down to the POW camps that they had for the Irish and the Scots and whatnot, and they walked through the POW camp and what have you, and they say, listen, we will give you your freedom if you go over to this place called America. It's across the ocean. It's a 4 to 6 month journey. You go over there, you work the lands for 5 years. After that, we will give you your freedom. POW said, shit, my home back in Ireland, my home back in Scotland, it's demolished. Everything that I grew up knowing and love is done. Might as well start anew, you know. So they signed up. They was on the next boat out. Another way that they got indentured servants into indentured servitude, right? Is they ramped up, they stiffened the laws. Let's say it was a unfortunate gentleman walking through the streets of London, and he's walking through a market, and he runs by a stand, and he grabs a mutton joint, and then he runs by another stand and grabs a loaf of bread, and he's running through the streets of, I don't know, south side of London, and he's taking bites and hunks out of this mutton joint. And taking bites and hunks out of this, loaf of bread, trying to scarf something down before the guards catch him, trying to make it back to his little hideout so he can feed his family. But he don't make it. They ascertain him. They bring him before the magistrate, and the magistrate says, you know what, uh, Thaddeus, I don't know what a English name is. Give me an English name. Virgil? I don't know. Let's go with Virgil. Uh, I'm trying to do my best English impersonation. Let's say Virgil. Nah, you know what? I'm not even gonna try that. This gentleman has been ascertained 3 times within the past month for stealing food for a smash and grab. the magistrate says, you know what? This is your third offense within a month. I'm gonna send you to the gallows. And the guy goes, well, hold on. You gonna chop my head off because I stole a mutton joint and a loaf of bread? The magistrate says, well, there is another option. And of course, the other guy, of course, the defendant is gonna be highly inclined to accept the other option besides getting his head chopped off, right? So the defendant's like, well, shit, lay it on me. Well, you see, we have this colony over in the Americas, right? And here's the deal. If you go over there and work the colonies for 5 years, we will overlook this minor infraction. So the defendant says, fuck it, sign me up. Takes his wife or his baby mama and his, 2 or 3 bastard kids, and they fucking next boat smoking. Then I started to think about the actual concept or notion of the transatlantic slave trade itself. And a lot of things didn't add up. For one, the number of the total ascertained quote unquote African slaves, it varies depending on what source you want to go to. Some people say 100 million. Some people say 50 million. If you go to Wikipedia, it'll say like 17 million or so. Let's just go with 17 million, right? Because I mean, still 17 million people during that time frame, given the Earth's population and the population of said region of that continent is still ridiculous, regardless of however you want to put it. But anyway, let's go with 17 million. Now let's do some math, right? We was talking history. Now let's do some math. All right, the transatlantic slave trade lasted roughly 250 years, right? 17 million divided by 250 years is like 55,000 a year, right? That's like roughly 150 to 200 a day. So that means that every day, at the very least, every day, 150 to 200 captive Africans were showing up on the shores of East Coast North America, are showing up in the Americas, period, right? Well, my question is, if England had a problem finding men to work the colonies, then who are they going to find to build these ships? And not only build these ships, but man these vessels, and not only man these vessels, but go to West Africa, ascertain these African captives, or negotiate for said African captives, then babysit them on a 4 to 6 month journey, because it took 4 to 6 months to cross that Atlantic. Now you mean to tell me it takes you 4 to 6 months to go from that hemisphere to this hemisphere, and you are bringing in 150 to 200 African captives a day? That's kind of far fetched. Now, when I make this argument, I've heard a lot of people say, well, Africans sold other Africans into slavery. Yeah, that's how it went down. Okay, fuck it. Let's roll with that. All right. Let's say warring tribes in Africa was fucking selling other tribes into slavery, right? Granted, I mean, mind you, um, this region, West Africa, is the home of Mansa Musa, who was at one point in time the richest man on the fucking planet. home to Timbuktu, uh, prestigious university that taught Europeans and this, that, and the third. Like, and they were dealing with Arabs and Arab trade and whatnot. Like, these were not ignorant people. They knew about commerce. They knew about marketplace value and cornering the market. They did not sell a captive, neighboring captive tribe of 300 men, women, and children for a barrel of rum and a handful of glass beads. I'm sorry, that just did not happen because a thinking man could only conclude that, hey, a lot of different motherfuckers is showing up on these coasts looking for slaves. Now, when we run out of captives to give them, and they come back still looking for slaves, and we the only motherfuckers here, mm, they might come looking for us. So let's corner the market. We're gonna drop the price up to control supply and demand. Like, these were not stupid people. They understood supply and demand. They understood exchange. So Europeans weren't just showing up with a handful of glass beads and a couple barrels of rum and buying slaves. No. These people understood gold, silver, and precious stone and whatnot. They understood that. So, all right, so motherfuckers want to say, well, they were, the Europeans, they hired, they had their own European slave marauding squadrons and whatnot that ran through the countryside of West Africa, ascertaining Africans and shackling them up and whatnot. Okay, well, those are men who could have been used to bolster the colonies. Why would, if you need men, like if you're racing with like five other nations, if you're in a land grab race with five other nations to colonize another continent or another hemisphere as soon as possible, why would you take those men and then send them to a third continent to go on a wild goose chase to chase Africans through the jungles of West Africa? No, you're gonna use that manpower to help you bolster the primary objective. Primary objective being colonizing the Americas. So I'm saying if you got the manpower, to, put together teams of slave capturers that's going through West Africa, ascertaining um, African slaves, then you can use that same manpower to go to Vermont, build forts against the quote unquote American Indians, and send them to Connecticut and New Hampshire and New York to build forts, or send them to North Carolina and South Carolina to build forts against the American Indians. Like, why would you even make them take an extra step? It makes no sense from a strategical standpoint, militaristic standpoint. It makes no sense. No sense. And then when you look at the money aspect of it, because not to mention, let me let me stress this point. England at the time of the transatlantic slave trade, quote unquote, and the colonization of America, they had a money problem. Money problem because they were stretched extremely thin. They had a civil war on their hands, and they were battling with other European nations, Portugal's, French, France, and Spain. So if you got, so if you're spending money on funding wars in Europe, if you're spending money on funding wars, a civil war within your own country, and other wars on your own continent, and you're trying to expand your empire to another hemisphere, that's a lot of money. Like you're stretched hella thin, right? Especially when you're coming from a continent with no natural resources, little to no natural resources, like England. Come on, you ain't had the snaps to do that, man. So you mean to tell me you just all of a sudden, you're just gonna pay these men IOUs to build hundreds of thousands of ships and man these hundreds of thousands of ships to go to Africa, to go to West Africa and apprehend and run through this hot ass West Africa, chasing down slaves and capturing them? Come on, man, the money don't add up. Then on top of that, all right, let's say that it did go down like that. Let's say that they did ascertain uh, African slaves, African captives, or whatever, right? Let's say they did do that. Let's say they got them on the ships and they transported them across the Atlantic on a 4 to 6 month journey. 200 at a time. Let's just go with 200 at a time, right? Packed in the bottom of a ship like sardines. Now let's say out of that 200, you're probably gonna have 110 of them are, no, you know what? Let's say you're gonna have 100 of them are gonna be women, and maybe 20 to 30 of them are children, and 70 of them are men. So you got 100 women packed in the cellar of the ship, chained together, packed in like sardines for 4 to 6 months. That means these women are menstruating 4 to 6 times during this trip, chained together. Just no tampons, no hygiene, no. They're not taking baths and whatnot. They're just packed in like sardines, menstruating. And then some of these women were pregnant or already pregnant or ready to about to give birth during the journey. Who's deliver? Are there midwives? Like there was no mention of a midwife in all of the history classes of the transatlantic slave trade that I've been through, from K through 12 all the way through my college years. I've never heard of any midwives on on the slave ship, like talking about some breathe, push. Like I've never heard of that shit. Never. Like who the fuck was the midwife? Not to mention you have a language barrier. Come on. So you got on average 200 people packed in the bottom of a ship like sardines, stacked on top of each other for 4 to 6 months, pissing, shitting, bleeding, menstruating, and giving birth on one another. All while they're on a ship with live animals. They're the Senate. You got to take into account the the senatorial. I don't even know if that's a word, but I'm gonna go with it. The senatorial technology of the time. Like there wasn't no bleach. Soap. Are you serious? Bleach, Clorox. Like what is that? It's no fucking Pine Sol, and no bitch popped up out of no big ass black woman popped up out of nowhere talking about that's the power of Pine Sol. The fuck no. They didn't even have hoses to fucking hose the bottom hole down. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, all they had was buckets of seawater to wash that shit. Come on, man. Like, given the conditions of said transatlantic slave trade, if you had 200 African quote unquote captives and you took them from West Africa across the Atlantic to the Americas, by the time you landed in the Americas, you would probably have maybe 25. Maybe. So many of them would have died. Then, not to mention, they're chained up, you know. Some of them, in some cases, some of the depictions I've seen, they're just laying on their back. So you mean to tell me they're just gonna be laying on their back for 4 to 6 months, pissing and shitting on themselves? And I've worked in a nursing home. I've seen what bed sores. I know about stage 1 through 4 bed sores. That is no joke to play with. And when you add urine and fecal matter in the mix, that just accelerates, the erosion of